accountability in the tourism sector. Yesterday, we had a fruitful exchange of ideas, and today promises to be just as insightful. We have an exciting agenda lined up, including keynotes, panel discussions, presentation, and the endorsement of the HLP paper. These sessions will provide further opportunities for us to deepen our understanding and collaborate on actionable solutions. Thank you once again for your continued participation and the valuable perspectives you bring to this dialogue. Without further delay, let us begin this forum.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome Director at the World Justice Project, Mr. Kamel Ayadi, a global expert in governance, ethics, and anti-corruption with over 40 years of experience. He has served as Minister of Governance and Anti-Corruption and Chairman of key regulatory and oversight bodies in Tunisia. Internationally, he advises institutions such as Chandler Institute of Governance, the World Justice Project, and the Globethics Foundation. Mr. Ayadi played a key role in developing global standards like ISO 37001 and ISO 37009. Today, Mr. Ayadi will deliver a presentation titled, "Why do most anti-corruption agencies fail or seem to fail to achieve their objectives?" drawing from past experiences and research findings. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Kamel Ayadi, Director of the World Justice Project. Mr. Kamel Ayadi.
Presentation is here, please. Don't see. Yeah, sorry. صباح الخير. بداية أود أن أشكر الساهرين على حضور تنظيم
the organizers of this important forum. I'd like to single out the Anti-Corruption Agency of Maldives and the Oversight and Anti-Corruption Authority of Saudi Arabia. I'd like to commend them for this role, especially the role of Nazaha in working on joint action.
Aujourd'hui, il représente le projet World Justice Project avant de
I'm sorry, it's not moving, please. Can we have a technical assistance, please? Okay, it's moving. So before diving into my presentation, let me just briefly present the World Justice Project, which I am representing today. The WJP is an independent multidisciplinary organization which was created in 2009. Its headquarters is in Washington, but it has also some regional office. The WJP publishes an annual report each year on the state of the rule of law, based on the level of adherence of countries to the principle of the rule of law. And the rule of law index covers more than 140 countries. So the mission of the WJP is to create knowledge, build awareness, and stimulate action through research and data, and through the rule of law index. those of you who are interested in learning more about the state of the rule of law in the world are very much welcome to attend our coming forum, which will be held from 23 to 27 June in Poland. We expect more than 700 participants, government leaders, civil society leaders, and experts. So let me now go back to my presentation. So as you can see on the screen, the title of my presentation is a bit provocative. Why do most anti-corruption strategies fail or seem to fail to achieve their objectives? And the seem to fail is, this wording is intentional, and I will come back to it later. So I have chosen to address this issue because of its relevance to the audience, especially those of you who are leading anti-corruption agency in your countries, which have the responsibility on the anti-corruption strategies from the design to the implementation through the assessment. So we often hear that corruption is getting worse every year and in almost every country. And this conclusion came often after the publication of international ranking or the results of global measurement indicators. So I thought that today it would be interesting to explore together with you whether this conclusion, this statement is truly real or whether it might be missing some progress. So I will share with you 5 years of reflection, studies, and research to try to answer this question. So for me, the question about anti-corruption strategy failing to deliver expected results, it's not a statement. It's not a conclusion, although I agree to a certain extent with it. It's just a question, a recurring question. So here are the most significant and major reasons found as behind the failing of anti-corruption strategy to deliver their results. The first reason, and I won't go through all of them because of the lack of time, I will focus on the fifth and the sixth reason. The first one is the lack of genuine political will, and I don't think that I needed to develop this. The second reason is the overemphasis on enforcement and prosecution at the expense of prevention. Of course, enforcement and prosecutions are essential to end impunity, but they don't bring about sustainable and long-term results. The third one is the excessive emphasis on compliance with little attention to integrity and ethical culture. Again, the compliance is essential, but a compliance program, if it doesn't lead to a culture transformation towards a culture of integrity and ethics, it could be counterproductive. And it can bring about also some collateral damage. The fourth one is national strategies missing a detailed sectoral breakdown. This is a huge issue. And we found that in so many countries that anti-corruption strategy, they remain at the horizontal level. There are no tools to break them down into vertical and sectoral level. And I have one of the colleagues who worked together who has published a book about this. And the fifth one is the local strategies, the poor alignment with international development and anti-corruption standards. And the sixth one, which I will also develop, is the lack of effective local, I'm speaking about local assessment and evaluation in the face of the influence, the strong influence of global rankings and global indices. So to analyze and to develop the lack of alignment with international development and anti-corruption standards, let me just give a brief retrospective analysis on the global anti-corruption efforts over the past 4 decades. We can distinguish three major phases from the very inception of the anti-corruption movement. The first phase is the advocacy phase. It was the 1980s to 1990. This phase was marked by the emergence of international NGOs, the movement of advocacy, the emergence also of global measurement indicators such as the CPI, the Corruption Perception Indicator, World Governance Indicator, and so on. And this phase could be credited with 4 major achievements and 1 significant breakthrough. Among these achievements is breaking the silence and lifting the taboo on corruption. Corruption also, which was regarded as a problem, internal problem, became a global public issue. And another achievement, which is the ability to quantify the impact of corruption on economic development, poverty, trust, and so on. And the last the achievement is the ability to paint and to create a global landscape as where corruption is endemic, and to point out countries where corruption is endemic. And the significant breakthrough is, of course, the adoption of the United Nations Conventions against corruption. The second phase, which is the emergence of legal instruments and the criminalization of corruption, which was marked by the ratification of the United Nations Convention against Corruption almost by every country, and the incorporation of the provision of the UNCAC into national regulations, and the criminalizations of corruption in almost every jurisdiction. This phase saw also an historical prosecutions of multinational corporations which end the impunity, such as you have a number of cases such as Siemens, Alstom, and so on. Then the third phase, which is crucial, it's the phase of the professionalization of the fight against corruption. So we witness a shift from the legal and prosecutorial approaches towards managerial solution. So corruption became a management issue, which could be dealt with through management standard. So this phase was marked by the emergence of a number of tools to address corruption that could be incorporated into management of public and private entities. A number of ISO standards, the ISO 37001 anti-bribery management standard, another standard about compliance management system, risk management, whistleblowing, governance, etc. And now we are developing a new standard, ISO 37009, conflict of interest standard. I have participated in almost the drafting of all these standards. And these standards are nowadays being incorporated progressively in the management of public and private entities, and where countries they were able to reduce the level of corruption are those who have really been moved from the prosecutorial phases to the professionalization phase. So nowadays, addressing corruption is not just a matter of enacting laws, it's a matter of expertise, it's a matter of adopting tools and standards. So just a brief analysis, where do developing countries stand in this global landscape? We saw that most of developing countries, apart some countries in Latin America, they missed the professionalization phase. They missed the professionalization phase because of a number of reasons. It could be the lack of expertise. Most of countries, developing countries, they didn't develop the required expertise to address corruption and to transform it as a management issues. Sometimes it's a question of resources, but sometimes also it's a rigid belief. Some countries got stuck in the prosecution phase, and particularly in countries where the corruption is driven by political purpose. So just a figure to give you the illustration. The number of ISO certified company, the company throughout the world which have been certified against ISO 37001 reached, this is the figure of the last week, 8,000. Only a small percentage of them are in developing countries, apart from some Latin American countries. So another also issues and another shortcomings is the minor role of the body responsible for prevention, such as audit. So the institutionalization of the fight against corruption is not really strong in developing countries. These are some of the reasons behind this failure. So let me move to the six reasons of the failure, which is the excessive absence of local effective assessment. So the excessive dependence on global ranking, which could be misleading. Those countries who only rely on global indices to understand where they stand in terms of addressing corruption, they are misled. And for this reason, today, the trend is towards developing local assessment, and I will be talking about this. The second is the significance of measurement, why measurement matters. The strength, I will also develop the strength and limitation of global indices and the emerging trends in measurement, and to give you some tips how to learn to develop local tools to assess the progress of anti-corruption effort. Because if you focus on measuring corruption, if you focus on measuring failure, there will always be a sense of failure. So if you focus on measuring progress, you will feel the progress that has been made, and then you can adjust your strategies to increase that progress. So measurement matters for the simple reason that we can't manage and improve what we can't measure. There is also another reason for developing local measurement is a political dimension of measurement. It's a huge issue in some countries. So for this reason, there should be a consensual assessment of the government efforts. So government, the same way that they measure inflation, they measure economic growth, they should be able also to measure the progress of their corruption efforts, and there should be a consensus, because otherwise there will be the manipulation and the instrumentalization, the political instrumentalization of the issue of corruption, and we have observed this in so many countries. So here are the main anti-corruption, the corruption measurement tools. We have, of course, here the CPI, the Corruption Perception Indicator of Transparency International, which is the pioneer. We have also our measurement indicator, the rule of law, which measures the rule of law, but there are 4 sub-indicators measuring corruption. We have also the World Governance Indicator of the World Bank. We have also variety of democracy. We have also the Global Competitiveness Indicator, and so on. In total, we have almost 20 indicators and sub-indicators measuring corruption throughout the world. So here, all the measurements of corruption could be grouped in 5 groups, 5 families. The first is the perception-based indicators. They are easy. The expertise exists almost in every country, but the problem is the perception biases. You know, the Trocadero paradox. The more you talk about corruption, the more people will feel that corruption is increasing. So if you rely only on perception, you never get the result. Perception indicators, they never reflect the result of government. So we should use them, but we have to be careful. If you measure corruption through perception, and particularly if you fight corruption, people will feel that corruption is increasing because you talk about corruption in newspaper, in social media, and so on. The second group is the fact-based indicators. These indicators are more reliable, but they rely on fact-based data. And you know, this is challenging because corruption is a hidden phenomena. so it's not easy to find the data. The third one is the composite indicators. Most of the indicators that I presented are composite indicators. What does this mean? Composite indicators, they use data created by other sources, like the Corruption Perception Index. They use among their data, the data that we produce in the World Justice Project. So they aggregate data from various sources. They come up to a formula, mathematical formula, and to provide the indicator. I don't like them very much. The fourth group is the single data-based indicators. These are indicators which are self-generated by the organization which publishes these indicators. The rule of law index is a self-generated data. And the last one is the proxy indicators. I would recommend the use of proxy indicators because proxy indicators, they don't measure corruption. They measure the opposite of corruption. They measure something that will tell you about your effort of corruption. They measure the robustness of integrity system and prevention system. They measure the effectiveness of your efforts in addressing corruption. So obviously, the more that the prevention and the integrity system is robust, the more corruption will decrease. So there is no point in measuring corruption. For government, I experienced this when I was minister. I used to use, before that, as a civil society activist, the indicators and to show that corruption is doing badly in fighting against corruption and so on. But when I became on the decision maker and I have to produce results, I found that these indicators, they didn't give me anything that I can use to understand what are the shortcomings in my system and what should I fix and what should I have do better. So governments and those who are working really on preventing and fighting corruption, they need indicators which can tell them about their efforts and to straighten out their strategy and their policy based on results of this indicator. So why, the question that you may ask, why do we need alternative tools, alternative measurement, if we have 20 indicators existing that measure corruption in all our countries? The question is, the issue is a question of purpose and needs. The purpose, because these indicators, these global indicators, they advance the global efforts in addressing corruption. They played a major role at the beginning, particularly, but they are not designed for the purpose. They don't serve local purpose. They are not created for government. They are created to support advocacy and to create a pressure to oblige government to put corruption in their own agenda. And they succeeded on this. So the needs of government is for actionable tools to support anti-corruption strategies. Their needs are for measurement, because measurement have evolved. Their needs is for something that can tell them about their strategies and when strategy works and when they don't work. So here are the strengths and limitations of global indices. There are, of course, strengths. The first strength is they provided global awareness, and they played a major role in advancing the fight against corruption. They also provide a global landscape as to where corruption is endemic. They also provide insights into foreign direct investment. I know a number of consultants and experts. They use the result of the CPI to make an assessment to help global investors to understand where they should direct their investment, where countries are, where corruption is not endemic. But there are also limitations. And the first limitation is the absence of common definition. We don't know what they measure because they rely on a different definitions of corruption. There is also a weak correlation. I have carried out a study which was published by Oxford University, and I can direct you to the link of the articles that I have published. And in these studies, I I gathered the data about my country and some other country for 20 years in 20 indicators and sub-indicators, and to see to what extent these indicators they say the same thing, they are correlated. And I found that out of 72 correlation coefficient, only 13% correlate strongly. Some other correlate strongly, but in the opposite way. What does this mean? This means when corruption is shown to have increased in one country, another indicator will tell you that no, it has decreased. So what indicator will you trust? What indicator will you adopt to measure your effort? And the third limitation, which is the data sources. Some of them rely on their own generated data, and some other aggregate data coming from other source. So here, the trends. This is based on the study that we have done over the past years. There are 4 confirmed trends in terms of measuring corruption. The first trend is towards homegrown indicators. More and more countries are aware that they need to develop their own tools. And I can give you some successful example. The second trend is from corruption measurement to integrity measurement. So measure integrity will give you more insight than measuring corruption. Measuring corruption will give you that corruption is increasing. Look at the Afrobarometer. Every year, corruption is increasing. Look at the CPI. Every year, corruption is measuring, although despite all the efforts that are being done by anti-corruption commissions. Measure the antidote of corruption using tools focusing on perspective rather than retrospective. Tools that distribute responsibilities for the future than casting blame about the past. And the third trend is from perception-based to fact-based measurement, or in some countries they use the hybrid system. The fourth is from aggregated data to self-generated data. So nowadays the need is for actionable and tailored metrics. The need is for assessment rather than measurement. Measurement and assessment, they tend to be used interchangeably, but there is a nuance between both. Measurement is about quantifying attributes, whereas assessment is about collecting data, analyzing data, interpreting data in order to make a judgment and draw conclusions and actions. So the need is to measure the maturity of integrity system rather than measuring the extent of corruption. Integrity and prevention system are, of course, the immunity against corruption. If you increase the immunity of your system against corruption, and you measure that immunity by some tools, then it will have a sense. Then you can understand where you are doing well and where you need to change your policy. So the need is, again, for homegrown indicators. Of course, countries can use and can continue to use household surveys, because household surveys are easy to implement. And they can give us a sense about the perception of public. Even sometimes the perception of public is biased, is manipulated. We need to understand. We need to know how the public understand and perceive what the governments are doing, even though they are manipulated, because we need to work on that manipulation. So the purpose of homegrown is an assessment is created, is something that should be tested, consolidated, and adapted. I have the chance to develop a tool, a measurement tool, which for the Chandler Institute of Governance, which is being implemented in a number of African countries. And this tool is drawn from the ISO 37001, the anti-bribery management system. And this tool, we don't go to measure corruption, but we measure how the government has built its prevention system, what are the shortcomings, what are the weaknesses point, and spot the gaps in that system, and to try to increase and to work on that system till the system become robust. Then we can ensure that corruption will automatically decrease, perhaps slowly, but surely. So I will conclude my presentation with this slide. From my own experience, there are 4 groups of countries with regard to this issue of measurement. There are countries which have relatively succeeded in building local capacity on reliable alternative measures. The best example I can tell you is the ICRC in South Korea. Brazil also, Nigeria, some almost, I went through more than 50 countries, and there are at least 10 countries which were successful in building a new system. They can use, of course, they continue to use global indices because they will provide you insight about your ranking. You need to use them, and they continue to have a lot of benefit, but you cannot use them to assess your efforts. And the second category of countries are countries that have developed local solutions, but I would say that rudimentary solutions. They're not sophisticated. These are tools that generate data, like household surveys, hotlines, auditing report. They collect data from auditing report, inventorying corruption cases, prosecution, administrative, and so on. But this is insufficient to measure the effectiveness of your prevention system. The third category is the countries which are aware of this issue. They're aware that they need to do something, that they cannot rely entirely to global indices. But they're still looking for solutions because perhaps of lack of local expertise. And the fourth category, perhaps 20 or 30% of the countries are countries with low awareness about the issue, and they still rely on global indices, particularly on the Corruption Perception Index. Thank you for your attention. I leave you my email here. You can email me if you need any details about what I have just said, because each line could be a presentation. Yes, please. You should ask the... Let's see how will they organize the session. They're asking for questions.
شكرا لمعالي الوزير على هذا السؤال المهم. لماذا تفشل معظم
I don't need
عربي. بيعرف عربي. ما شاء الله. أشكر معاليكم على هذا السؤال المهم، وهو لماذا
Very much for this important question, and apparently it's related to all anti-corruption policies. And then you also focused on a third point, that is focusing on more compliance and commitment while forgetting about prevention. And I totally agree with you. And I would like to say that the Anti-Corruption and Oversight Authority in Saudi Arabia did not forget this point and this aspect, but we worked on it via partnerships with the Ministry of Education in Saudi Arabia through different processes. There is one process related to public education, and it's focusing on prevention since primary education, intermediate, and then secondary education, and then also in at the level of higher education. The authority in Saudi Arabia wanted to work on it since the nascent childhood and on different age categories. For example, there are fees, there are images, pictures, and tales that are presented to children about how to protect public finance, public money, and how to, for example, protect public facilities, hospitals, schools, etc. So this is a very expressive way, and we use, for example, images in order to teach them about how to protect these areas and facilities and how to avoid wasting them and damaging them. Also, through interest in awareness raising, and mainly at the level of higher education, where we take into consideration these age categories and mainly the issue of integrity clubs. And these clubs are over 50 today in the kingdom, and they are spread over higher education institutions and vocational training institutions, and they focus mainly on activities to attract volunteers in order to prepare content related to integrity, and we also worked on curricula, and universities created curricula related to protecting integrity and anti-corruption, and of course with the aim of achieving those objectives you mentioned. Thank you very much for this important question, and this leads me to a theme that I was interested in at a certain time of my career. It's focusing on compliance culture, to comply with the rule, and people who believe that anti-corruption is just procedures and laws, and to force people to comply. This creates a compliance culture rather than performance culture, and then the officials become this way evaluators, not of performance and initiatives, but of compliance. So in our culture, in our Arabic culture mainly, we punish, we sanction those who do not comply and who are different. However, those who do not actually follow the rules, they do not do it in order to achieve certain results, and so this is why I said that excessive compliance has collateral damages, like creating, for example, officials who only focus on compliance without thinking about evaluating performance and the accomplishment of objectives. Thank you. I also published a book on the compliance culture because we suffered from it. Because yes, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for this important presentation, and I hope that there will be an in-depth research on this issue, on strategies and their importance, and mainly in the Arab world. We in the Arab region, we live in an atmosphere of where we have a lot of strategic thinking, and there are a lot of strategies that we discover and explore. And we in Palestine, we are now implementing the fourth strategy since the creation of the Anti-Corruption Authority, and all these strategies were national, and they were aimed at reinforcing participation in the implementation of such strategies. But there are difficulties and challenges related to the implementation and the achievement of their objectives. And I think, according to what I observed when I was in charge of the authority, Anti-Corruption Authority, and I was in charge of preparing these four strategies and the monitoring of their implementation, and I have 3 points to raise here that reinforce the idea of the non-applicability of these strategies. First of all, the issue of will or determination, at political will, and also the institutional will. The second point that I want to raise, it's the adoption of these strategies and evaluation-based accountability, because accountability is very important. Identifying responsibilities is extremely important, and mainly the responsibility of the institutions in implementing such strategies. That's an important point too. There is also a difficulty or problem related that could differ from one school to another, from one person to another, and it is human resources and financial resources. The implementation of strategies, of course, require capacity building in order to be adopted by the categories in charge of the implementation. And the budget is also important in order to engage in activities that sometimes could be costly, and mainly for access to communities, access to institutions, and reinforcing campaigns, sensitizing campaigns on corruption and whistleblowing. These are three important points that are very important for us based on my previous experience. In addition to what you said, thank you very much. Thank you for the addition. Yes, another question.
Mr. Kamel?
Yeah?
Here.
Yes, please.
Sorry to intervene, sir.
Sorry.
I know it's a wonderful presentation, but time doesn't permit us to take any more questions. I'm so sorry, sir.
You are the master ceremony, so I'm very...
Thank you, Mr. Ayadi, for your wonderful presentation, sir. Next item on the agenda is our panel discussion. We kindly request everyone to hold on as we make the logistics arrangements on this stage. Thank you.